Everybody is. That's why they call it a depression.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, depression.
Happy Thursday, which is the Friday night of Bay Street. And since we're on King Street and Adelaide Street. We're not on Bay Street. So why are we so excited about Bay Street?
You know what? They should
Thursday
change
nights?
King to King Eddie. King Edward Street.
Why? They gave you a hotel, now you want the rest of the street too?
Yeah.
Boy,
yeah.
oh boy.
Yeah.
That's the thing about this life. You only get if you ask or take. If you take and get away with, then you also get.
You know, that's how people become kings and presidents, right?
That's what they call wealth transfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, wealth appropriation.
Wealth, wealth
So
separation.
we got to talk about weed here. Like, what the hell is
All
going
right.
on
Let's
here? What's
just
going on?
take a look at this financial statement. I just happen to have it printed up here in front of me.
Well, I'll tell you, it can't be simple. It can't be simple.
Well, let's not look at the financial statement. Let's just content ourselves with this idea that the bellwether of the Canadian cannabis industry, the first company to go public, the company that has raised more money at a better valuation with a better capital structure and has a bigger growing footprint than any other country in the world, except maybe Aurora, shit the bed.
So a billion got lopped off in market value at least, right, today?
Yes, lost 15% of its value. So it's now worth $7 billion. It's what Canopy's now worth, what Aurora was at. No, that's not true either. They're getting close. Let's just say that all the companies are getting closer in value together. Canopy reported $1.08 per share in losses, or $387 million, was it, on revenue of $85 million.
85 million revenue. That revenue number is nowhere near. They're realizing that this burgeoning industry is going to take a little longer.
Yeah, I don't think we can call it an industry at this point, because at this point,
nascent. It's nascent.
Well, it's not really nascent. I mean, it's nascent. It's
in terms of
only
numbers.
Recently resumed its legal status.
Yeah.
So let's not forget, depending on who you talk to, the cannabis industry actually got underway either 5,000 or 10,000 years ago. There's evidence in the Ayurvedic scriptures suggesting that in old India was where it first happened, not in Taoist China, as the 2,000-year window suggests.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's not a new industry, and it's only been illegal since 1952, or 37, or 28, depending on which sort of law you consider illegal. But the bottom line here is, it's called weed for a reason. You can take a handful of seeds and chuck it in a pot, and you'll get high from what you smoke 4, 5, 6 months later.
Yeah,
and
provided they're reasonably good strain, right? Like it's.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a good strain. I mean, if you smoke hemp that's less than 0.3% THC,
you get a little buzz.
Well, if you smoke enough of it, you're going to get high.
You know, I've smoked pot for probably, I didn't want to say, but since university, okay? I went to university.
You were a young fella.
Yeah, and
when there were only
50 years ago.
When there were 2 in North America.
Not quite 50 years ago. You know.
You have to go by horseback.
And I always thought, when this went legal, I said, this is unbelievable. I can't believe this, because I know how to get this from people that grew a little bit, without mentioning names. But now that you could grow your own, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's not like building a still and making your own alcohol. That's maybe dangerous. But,
wow. You mean dangerous in terms of your personal freedom?
Well, they say, you know, what some of the moonshine, you know, could kill you because it's so high in alcohol content.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's been some mistakes.
Well, I'm concerned about that because I'm about to start making my own pear brandy, I've decided. I just ordered the trees today.
Right. Really?
I mean, we're talking from scratch. Not just from pears, but I'm talking from seeds.
Yeah.
No, not from seeds. I'm going to buy some junior trees, theoretically.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you make your own pear brandy.
Yep. And I'm going to put the bottles on the pear tree so that the pear grows inside the bottle, which is a technique I learned in Portland.
Really?
Yeah. So when I give you a bottle of this pear brandy, there'll be a pear inside, which usually makes people excited. But I think, I'm like, well, what? So this is a less valuable bottle of brandy than a bottle without a pear in it, because the pear is displacing that much more space in the bottle and you're getting that much less brandy. So really, it's a gimmick to make you happy with having a smaller bottle of brandy. That's what I think. Anyways, look what just landed on my desk, Ed.
Uh-oh, financials.
Financial statements from Canopy Growth Corporation. Now, Canopy...
So this is in millions of dollars, yeah. Yeah,
Thousands.
Thousands of dollars. So 82,779 is 82 million,
Yeah.
right?
And 1102464 is 1.1 billion. So, I mean, the balance sheet doesn't look that bad.
Wait a minute. I'm looking at, I got, there's what? This Canopy Rivers.
Canopy Rivers? Oh, I got Canopy Growth.
Well, you got, okay, that's one package. Okay.
Oh, I see. This is,
okay.
Zenibus. We've got Zenibus, and we've got Canopy Rivers and Canopy Growth. Canopy Rivers was not really that bad. They lost 2 cents a share net income wise. And Canopy Rivers is, Canopy Rivers occupies a unique niche in the cannabis industry in that it's one of the only publicly traded merchant banks in the cannabis space. And you can refer to it as a merchant bank or a investment enterprise exclusively devoted to cannabis, but they have investments that aren't necessarily going to turn out to be cannabis-centric. Maybe cannabis compliant or cannabis friendly or have some cannabis component, but not centric. Anyways, so let's see. Rivers reported. Why don't we start with the income statement here, and that way we can be. Consolidated statement of income and loss. Here we go.
This is Rivers. What?
This is Rivers. So income was $164,000.
I thought they lost money.
Well, the operating income was $164,000.
Well, but then they had their overhead against it, which made them lose money.
The net operating income was $5.2 million to the downside. So anyways, so that constitutes a 2 cent per share loss on a consolidated basis. On an adjusted EBITDA basis, let's see here. It doesn't say it adjusted, but whatever. So 2 cents, that's not really so bad. Canopy's a real surprise, and I mean,
is this saying
they're down 15% on the day
Is this
so far?
saying the industry is not booming like everyone thought it was?
Well, bear in mind that this is an industry that became fully capitalized in a period of 5 years, and all that cheap paper that was at the foundation of this industry is now free trading. So the problem here is that of all of the paper that's out there, so much of it, the majority of it still probably has a cost basis well below current prices of the entire market. So this is why people act surprised when they see this continuing downturn, but they shouldn't be surprised. I mean, let's face it, Canopy Growth raised money at 70 cents a share, 80 cents a share, $2 a share.
Right.
Like all that paper, if it hasn't been sold yet, I mean, most guys have probably leveraged it up somehow and are reluctant to, liquidate because that might catalyze all kinds of other.
So let's say you bought the stock at $10. You bought weed at $10. You wrote it all up to 60, 70, whatever. And now it's 20. So you still doubled your money, but you're thinking, geez, I can't sell the stock now. I've left so much money on the table. I got to get some of that money back. And that's the sort of the thinking that enters in. But maybe you should.
That's not thinking.
No, that's not thinking. You should just take some money off the table.
You should take it all off the table.
And the other thing you should do too. Let's say you bought some stock here recently in a stock like, and for some reason, I'll give you an example. Halo has doubled in the last 4 days or 5 days or 6 days. Halo's doubled. So maybe one should do you wait for a quadruple, or are we in a different world now where things don't quadruple anymore? Maybe a double.
Well,
and again, it's not about Halo, it's about the double. If you doubled your money in a short period of time, it'd be prudent to take Yeah, maybe take your investment off and let the rest ride.
Yep. Well, there's
Different strokes for different folks.
I mean, I used to have just a standard policy. As soon as I saw the ability to get my bait back, I got my bait back and I let the rest ride until there was some, prolonged weakness, and then I'd take it off.
Wealthy promoters or wealthy mining people would always say that. Once they got their money out, they didn't care. And you don't care. Psychologically, you say, oh, well.
Well, and then I was sort of brought to my attention that I was leaving too much money on the table on issuers that were running much higher. So if you bought a stock at 10 cents and at 20 cents you're double, so you pull out your bait and let the rest ride.
And it goes to
and
$1.
It goes to $70. Exactly. You sort of jump too soon. Mind you, you never lose money when you get your bait back.
And you're not as jumpy when you've got no investment.
That's true.
And I've had some pretty good option positions as when I was consulting more, and there was a market to consult in, and I never, because it didn't cost me to have the options, they're in the money, I said, I'll let it ride. Now they're worth nothing. I should have taken some money off the table.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of these things are going to zero, let's face it. Some of these things are going to zero.
Some of them have already gone to zero. Like, who's in receivership? Dionamed is just about zero.
WAYL still halted.
WAYL Wayland, yeah. So
I don't even know
what
why
happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the indexes now, just to confirm our ugliest.
They all have to be at least 1 year lows now.
Yeah. The large cap index is leading the whole complex lower by 6.87%. Small cap index is down by 4%. Let's jump to the index page, but we already know which company is leading everything to the downside. So actually, Canopy's come back a bit. They were down 15% when I looked earlier. They're only down 13%
Wow.
now. So they've recovered $1.12.
Bit of a win. Bit of a win,
yeah. Aurora Cannabis is only down 41 cents or 8% on the day. Curaleaf has actually turned green. Earlier when I looked at these, there was no green, there was only red. So the bellwether of the industry catalyzed a complete sell-off, which is now reversed later in the day, at least in some names. And it's hard not to be. It's not hard not to be a complete and utter bear. But I'll tell you what, I entertained some folks today who are getting ready to launch a new cannabis venture, and did they say cannabis venture or cannabis adventure? Well, both.
Huh.
Yes. So, but the mutually agreed upon reality is that we're not raising money to go public. We're raising money to pay a dividend directly to shareholders privately. And I think that what you're going to see in the years immediately in front of us is the end of capital markets for small companies and the beginning of secondary markets for private companies, where the
stay private until you build up
stay private, period.
A critical mass.
Well, I mean, when's a good time to go public if you're able to pay a dividend to your shareholders and it's private? I'll tell you when the market multiple payable on any sector member becomes way higher than it would in what times would be considered normal. In other words, when it's going into a bubble, take it public and give everybody who your long-term shareholder is that extra lift. Bring in all kinds of new shareholders who are late to the party and let them suffer the misery when the slings and arrows of a bloated market come home to roost. That's really the essence of the public market. It's like a place where guys who got paper cheap come to sell it to those who can't get cheap paper and are willing to buy expensive paper.
Hear, hear. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I mean,
a lot of times, look, if you're going into a shell.
A shill?
A shell.
Not a shill.
With a shill.
A shell with a shill.
A shell with a shill.
That's a publicly traded company right there.
But if there's nothing in it, and that's when you go into it, at least you know there's no downside. Unless you paid a lot of money to go into a thing with nothing in it. But that doesn't usually happen, because there's nothing to promote. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting. But a lot of money okay, when the market was at its peak, if you took all the marijuana companies, because there's so many more of them now than there were back then, so that's also diluted the thing. But it'd be interesting to see what the top market cap value was for marijuana companies at the peak and what it is now. It's got to be 30 or 40% of the total value back then, right?
Oh no, it's in the worst case scenario, it's over 80%.
Yeah.
In the base case scenario, the average, it's well above 50%.
They're all cut in half.
They're all cut in half.
Or more. Kronos is trade. I just see down $1 today.
Yeah.
Here's going by at 961.
Well, let's look at if we look at, we're looking at this list here in front of me now is ordered in order of market cap. So by market weighting. So weed is number 1. It's currently trading at 21.12, and the year-to-date high. 1 second. Let's wait for this to load. Well, the year-to-date high happened back in. Was actually May for weed. It was. Let's see, 60. I thought I saw 72. It was above $70. So weed has lost 60% of its value.
I got the chart of Kronos up, which goes back to when this thing was conceived, which is sometime in May of 2017. So let's say 2.5 years. Maybe we put that chart up. I just want to point something out here. So that's from May 2017, so 2.5 years. But look, it broke out of this. There's your first run, and then it did it again, and sort of again. But when it broke that line there, I'll tell you, I think it's almost going to be impossible for, and again, this company, but that kind of formation, that's like a 2-year distribution top on 3 separate bubbles, and now we're below it. You know, I think the best you can expect is for this thing to go back to that line. Of course, anything can happen, because you might have said this, what I just said, you could have said it there, and then it did go up. But look, here's a company that's got so much cash, and remember, this was the company that was pointed out by the Citron as being a piece of POS, piece of shite.
Which?
Kronos.
Yeah, but
then the deal.
Kronos called it 50 cents, which that's still a long way from that.
No, of course. But I'm just saying, this is a company with lots of money.
Yeah. Okay, well, so if we look at, let's see here. So the high for Canopy Growth was $76
I'm gonna put
in
Canopy.
November of 2018. And now it's 21. So it has actually lost 72% of its value.
Well, yeah, so 50 on 7, 5 on 7, a 7 is about 14, so it's about 70%.
It's exactly 72.368.
Okay. Well, I did it.
Good guess, though.
I did it the quick way.
So that's never mind. 80%. Some of these companies, like let's see, CanTrust. What was CanTrust all time? Well, CanTrust actually hasn't sunk that low. I mean, it still holds value, which is remarkable to me.
You know, I think I'm gonna use some of the adages that are used to describe a life, and I got the 5-year chart of Canopy up here. You know, what do they say? From dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Like, look, this thing was. And I'm not suggesting anything here. All I'm saying is it was nothing. Then it got crazy and crazier. Look at these moves. Like you say, to $70. Here we are back to 20, 21. That trend has been violated. Wow. It's hard. And there was a very smart guy on a show this morning as I was working out early in the morning while everybody else was sleeping.
On our show. I didn't know we were on that early.
No, another show.
You watch other shows? Boy, oh boy.
Yeah, because you're not on all the time. If you were on all the time, I'd be watching you.
Oh, come on.
And all they said was, there's no proof here that this industry is going to start generating huge profits. There's no evidence of that yet. Some companies are being run properly and are generating EBITDA. Okay, Alethea looks like they got lots of working capital, lots of cash.
You know the guys are making a lot of money. are the black market dispensaries, like the guys on Spadina Street.
Are you kidding?
Operating with impunity in broad daylight.
No taxes.
No taxes.
I've heard Trudeau
Bringing
owns a
people in
lot of
off the
these
street,
a lot of these dispensaries.
Trudeau?
Well, that's why these rules are being enforced because all the politicians own all this stuff.
No kidding. That's conspiracy theorist.
I wonder if I can go to jail for saying that.
Well, if they...
I just heard that. I'm not saying it's true.
You're hedging your bets already.
Hedging.
Could you go to jail for implying that somebody's behavior is criminal? Absolutely. Since you know, I don't know. I think they'd have to prove that you actually convinced somebody that Trudeau was a criminal. But you don't have to do that. He does enough of that himself. Anyways. Politicians, it's the criminal class.
Did you see the front page? Did you see the front page of the Globe today?
I did not.
I guess it's in these impeachment hearings. I guess it's been determined that Trump was saying, "We'll give you military aid if you can basically say that the Democrats, through the Biden thing, were doing some funny things over there." In other words, it's going to be a quid pro quo. Well, I guess that's tit for tat, right?
Yeah, tit for tat. What's another one?
Another one?
Apples for oranges?
No. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Bakshish. What else? Bribery. Extortion. Collusion.
Yeah.
What's coercion?
Do you know anything about that company, Work Week? Is it Work Week?
Work Week. Week work.
We work.
We worked.
I pretend to work.
Now we work.
Anyway, they said that they had a terrible quarter.
1.2 billion lost.
Because of all the costs associated with going public.
Which they never did.
Well, they spent a lot of money trying to. You know what? I got to tell you, this money just keeps moving from one person to another. Loblaws had a good quarter, and you know what they blamed it on?
What?
Shoppers. I guess the shoppers same source sales.
Loblaws blamed the shoppers for a good quarter?
They didn't blame them. They attributed their good fortune.
That would make sense. I mean, if your stock price went down because you had a good quarter, would you blame shoppers?
Do you feel like when you go to certain chains, you feel better than going to other chains? Unless you go to the chain gang.
Chain smoking. Chain smoking, I definitely don't feel better. Mind you, I don't do that anymore.
You've cleaned up your act, haven't you?
Well, that's because I almost died. There's some wake-up calls you don't need to have two of. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't almost die. Well, I've almost died multiple times in my life, not recently. Anyways, you know who I had here just a short while ago today? Do you know who Ross Rebagliati is? Ross Rebagliati was the first guy to compete professionally in the Olympics on a snowboard.
No kidding.
Ross Rebagliati was the first athlete to lose his gold medal as a result of cannabis consumption. Ross Rebagliati...
Is he from Quebec?
No, he's from BC.
Okay,
Ross Rebagliati was the first guy to get a medal reinstated for being improperly removed from him for cannabis consumption. Anyways, I had the great honor of Ross Rebagliati in our studio just a short while ago, and here's our conversation. I'm joined now by Olympic gold medalist and cannabis advocate Ross Rebagliati. Ross, welcome.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Ross, let's start with a quick overview because some people watching this won't be that familiar potentially with your past. So in a nutshell, what's your big claim to fame?
Big claim to fame was snowboarding and getting to the Olympics in '98 for the first appearance for snowboarding in the Olympics and winning the gold medal and having it taken away for a positive drug test for cannabis and having it returned a couple of days later, but not before I had been to jail in Japan and all kinds of other crazy experiences with media and paparazzi style sort of for a couple of days. Was unreal. So
at least you were high.
I wish I was. I wish I was. But it was quite the whirlwind getting to the Olympics, and then right after the Olympics I was thrown into the washing machine, and I ended up on the Tonight Show a couple of days later, and the whole thing really blew up.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and so out of that, you've created a business, Legacy, and also, well, I was familiar with Ross Gold.
Right, Ross Gold we still have.
Which is now part of the Legacy family.
Correct.
Tell me about Legacy. What's the concept? What's the product?
Yeah, so Legacy is a cannabis company that's basically around, sports, performance. CBD is a big part of it, anti-inflammatory, topical creams, gel caps with different tinctures of THC and CBD. And it's really kind of the more, so like the Ross Gold brand is the rec brand, it's the younger demographic, and then Legacy is kind of the older demographic. Not old, but when you start getting more serious about your health and your life and something that's sustainable that you can repeat over and over. If you have a family or a high, intense job or something like that, you need, maybe you're at work, you build houses and you have like joints that need taken care of at the end of the day. So yeah.
Okay, so there's an athletic component to this in that you're an advocate with Athletes for Care. You're an ambassador for Athletes for Care. What is the organization about? What does it do?
So Athletes for Care is an organization that really, takes the athlete once they've retired from their sport and helps them integrate or reintegrate back into regular, life. And so whether that, means a job placement in one industry or another, whether it's cannabis or
I was
a different industry.
why would they want to do that?
Right. There's a lot of exciting opportunities right now with cannabis and the kinds of jobs. It's the full gamut from marketing right to the growing of cannabis and everything in between. So you really, there's a position for everybody in cannabis, and we just want the athletes to have somewhere to go once they retire. So when they're still maybe at the last couple of years of their career, they can start looking into what they might be doing. And some athletes are more proactive about that. And their sports come with scholarships and whatnot. Other sports don't have that. And for example, I didn't go through the whole snowboard thing with scholarships or anything. So I came out of the World Cup tour and the whole like going to jail and losing my medal and getting it back again. And I was a little bit traumatized after that. And it took me a few years to reintegrate just on my own, being a known person and trying to operate as a, myself. It was a tricky situation.
I bet. There's lots of sort of high-level athletes advocating for cannabis as a treatment for post-sport injury-related conditions, especially in football. They're suggesting that CBD has a strong impact on CTE. We've had everything from mixed martial arts athletes to professional wrestlers to football players is big, basketball players, rugby players we've had. So is there a real natural affinity for cannabis among pro athletes when it comes to recovery?
Yeah, there is. And it's been kind of undercover because of prohibition.
Right.
Also because of big sponsorship and corporate involvement in these sports like baseball and football. The whole stigma and stereotype around it really kept the athletes from talking about it. A lot of athletes became dependent on painkillers and other opiates that were prescribed to them by their team in one way or another, from the doctors or handlers or what have you, and didn't really have the cannabis option presented to them. And I think it was just from word of mouth and through the grapevine, the athletes started learning that there's a healthier choice that's not addictive, that isn't going to affect you and your family once you're retired, and that's cannabis. And so, these athletes that you mentioned all come from pretty high impact sports, and they would know. So the football players, they're talking about concussion and recovery from concussion and protection from future concussion. CBD is one of the amazing substances that we've discovered that can actually create a plasma layer between your brain and your skull to protect your brain from concussion in the first place.
Whoa.
And especially works great for rejuvenating cells that have pretty much gone dormant after a concussion, which we would have normally called dead brain cells, but they're not. And so there's been a lot of science to back up the claims that we've been making as athletes over the years to legitimize, our path forward, basically.
You bet. And so do you see a future where professional sports organizations like the NFL, the NBA actually acknowledge that CBD is a legitimate approach to recovery and remediation of sports injuries?
It would be irresponsible not to at this point. WADA just took CBD off the list of banned substances completely. There's been 1,000% increase in the allowable amount of THC as far as WADA is concerned. And so over the years since they added THC to the list after my experience, they've raised it 1,000% and taken CBD right off it. So there's definitely that pressure on the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and all the other big sports, rugby, to really look at cannabis again. And not only because of the effectiveness of it, but also to look at the way opiates have kind of affected our society in a negative way, and how we can make better choices, healthier choices.
Sure. So is there a place where we can find legacy brands? Like, are they in the dispensaries? Are they online at this point?
Right now, you can find legacy brands at legacybrands.com.
Okay, great.
Legacybyross.com.
Sure.
We are bootstrapping, and we were part of bringing cannabis out of prohibition into legalization. So we started Ross Gold approximately 10 years ago. During prohibition, we had a dispensary in Kelowna, British Columbia, where we operated for a couple of years before we saw what the regs were going to be for moving forward into the white market. And so we're closed down right now. And we have our websites are up, and we're right now currently entering into the new era.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, that's a great introduction to all of your endeavors. I'm so honored to have you here and meet you, and love to have you back soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, James.
Hey, Ed.
Where were you?
I was out and about.
Out and about?
Out and about.
Boy, I feel a lot lighter today.
Do you?
Yeah, I got all that hair cut off.
Thank God.
Samson.
Shorn.
Just call me Samson.
Shorn. Can I call you Shorn?
Shorn. Shorn.
Can you go do this?
Blah. Bah.
Not bad. Ed, you know I have a present for you from a company that was here earlier.
Oh.
And
let's see if I can open it.
That's a package of...
I can't open these things.
What do you mean you can't open
Look
it?
at it.
It's very simple.
Press there. You fucking Jesus.
There's weed in there, Ed.
I know. I can't get it. What are you supposed to do? Light the pack?
There, you want me to show you how it's done?
Yeah. Is it simple?
It's pretty simple. I think you just go like that. There.
Look.
You got 2 reefers in there. And so it is child-proof, so that's good that it works. So you got 2 pre-rolls in there. The brand is Wink, and we had...
I got my friend with me.
Yeah, we had this company on the show today, but they're not showing up on the menu. So, they're good. They're going to be on the show tomorrow.
Can I
Spark one up? No, there's no smoking.
No, I'm not going to spark it up. I don't need to spark it up.
No, you can just sit there and sniff it all you want.
Sniff it.
Sniff it.
Sniff this.
Yeah, smell that.
Hey, I can always smell the bottom.
Oh, geez, you had to go there. Okay.
Oh, I'm talking about a bottom in the market.
Oh, that's...
Oh, by the way, my trading buddy, I won't mention his name, but he's a real student of the market. He's looking for a little bounce here in the HMMJ. He's seeing that he thinks he wants to buy it.
Okay.
He won't buy a specific company or short a specific company. Can we look at the HMMJ just quickly? Because
you can do anything you want at Alice's restaurant.
Look at that. That's the HMMJ, which was $22.50. Okay, that's good. We'll just leave it there. Just a second. Let me capture this. You know, look, it looks like a major top. That all took place in a year and a half. But look at this. That's almost like this in reverse.
Wow.
for dust to dust, dust to dust. Yeah, it looks like a major distribution top. The term bubble comes to mind.
No kidding. Yeah, well, so that's what the whole sector was obviously at this point, is a bubble. And if you look at the dot-com collapse in 2000, March 2000, this is exactly like that.
But that was even bigger, though. That was even bigger.
$5 trillion.
Is that what it got to?
$5 trillion is what the
market cap was.
Soundbite was in by March of 2001. Was $5 trillion.
March of 2000.
By March of 2001. $5 trillion in shareholder value had been vaporized in the dot-com.
Oh, yeah.
After 1 year.
Yeah.
So $5 trillion hasn't been lost in cannabis.
I think the NASDAQ dropped from over 5,000 to like 700 in two years or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that was, and then we rallied like hell, and we had another one in 2008.
Well,
and now we've had one of the biggest uninterrupted bulls. I was listening to Trump in his speech. He said, I think even this year the NASDAQ's up 25%. Just this year.
Donald Trump said that. Did he say it in a way that suggested he was responsible for that?
Well, he said, if the Fed would listen to me and cut rates, like they should, it would even be up more. But then somebody pointed out that every real estate guy, their only solution to everything is lower interest rates, because that's what makes them money, lower interest rates.
Right. Well, and the interesting component that's largely forgotten here is people forget that banks make their money on the spread in the interest rates from what they can borrow at to what they can lend it at. And if the rates are under 1% or under 2%, that doesn't leave a lot of room for margin.
Right.
So the lower interest rates are, the less banks make, the less.
Yeah. Well, that's why the Deutsche Bank's almost at an all-time. They're talking about survival.
Anyways, Charting Man Dan had some added to our misery with some very astute comments a little while ago. Here's that conversation. Joined now by Charting Man Dan McDermott from thechartguys.com. Dan, welcome.
Glad to be back, James.
So, Dan, I don't know what we can say about the cannabis space that we don't say every week these days, but how's your sentiment meter today?
Oh, it's definitely down in the depths of despair, and that definitely has my attention to start looking in the other direction very, very patiently and cautiously. We know we're not going to go to zero, so there will be a bottom, and I said in a recent video that I do believe there will be very solid, I think I said 100% gains once we do find that bottom, but we have not found it yet, and we had a very clear, important point on the charts heading into this earnings season, and so far every single name has had a bearish reaction to its earnings, and that is leading us to another leg down, and that's pretty much just reaffirming the thesis that the bears have had over the last 5 months.
Right. I guess Canopy Growth's announcement of a loss of $1, was it $1.08 per share, certainly was enough to send a lot of people heading for the open windows over the street. And so let's say that the rest of the news is uniformly bad, because there's no reason to think otherwise. When does the bottom come up in this market?
The bottom will be found where we reach a point. I view it as scales. So we have shorts and longs, and we'll reach a point where nobody is left to go short. We'll reach a point where nobody that is long is going to sell their position anymore. And we'll reach a point where institutions start saying, okay, these are fair value prices and we see upside from here. And we've already had a few groups come out and say, we think this is the bottom. They've been wrong. But that point will come. It always comes. And that will be the shift where we see that daily and weekly uptrends start to take place.
Yep. Okay. So let me ask you this, Dan, as a technical guy, how many green candles will it take to make you a believer on, say, Canopy Growth in terms of a daily candle?
Well, I need to see, it's less about how many green in a row that we see, and it's more about the continuation move. So again, that's what a trend change is. We can see a big green 3-day move. That's great. We can go 20%. But if we do not consolidate from that move, set that high or low, and then see continuation, it doesn't mean anything. And we have examples of that in the USMJ space, where a name like Ianthus will bounce 50%, not change its daily trend by forming that clear higher low and higher high, and it just slowly fades and gives it all back. So we have to see that follow through, because that's what continues to put pressure on shorts, and that's what shows us that there are bulls looking to get in and buy the dips.
Okay, so at this point, that emergence of that pattern is just non-existent. I'm wondering, I'm looking at it from a fundamental basis and saying, well, okay, there's not really any reason to buy the stocks on a fundamental basis, and in fact the catalysts are all rather profoundly negative. But I do believe that the worst news possible has now happened, and anybody who could sell a share, I believe, in this market has sold a share who wants to. Anybody who's accumulating might have been wrong thinking that it was this early, but I think that the combination of the end of tax loss selling, this major revaluation, and what starts to look like capitulation to me when you see a 15% drop in a day. Mind you, we've had that so many times now that it's almost de rigueur, but those things sort of all seem to be coalescing towards an end of the year kind of. That's a good time for a reversal to happen. Tax loss selling's over. Everybody's sold all the stock they can. If the stocks are now starting to reflect fair value on a traditional fundamental basis where the multiples of the actual earnings are making sense, then why wouldn't there be a reversal and the anticipated bifurcation of quality versus those still dependent on the life support of capital markets, which I think that's where the division's going to happen. Anyways, what do you think of that? The new year is the next time I'm really looking for some kind of change.
Yeah, I mean, we just keep kicking the can down the road. It was the fall rally and 2.0 that everybody was looking towards. Now it's the end of tax loss selling. Absolutely, it could be that way. And honestly, I am shifting my game plan now where I have been playing CGC oversold bounces because as a trader, that's one of my strengths. I love oversold bounces. And I've done it fairly well with CGC the past few months, but I've always locked in my gains short term and then gone back to a fresh, clean slate. From here on out, I'm going to shift my perspective, and I'm going to be positioning myself to try and put myself in a low risk or break even point to try and build a long-term position. So an example of that would be, let's say I scale in on this dump. I don't think our bottom is in just yet, but let's say I enter at $16 and $15. So I have an average of $15.50. And then we bounce up to $16. I'll sell half of my position at a 50-cent gain. That puts my break even down at $15. And I'll set my stop at break even and then try and see a more prolonged daily trend change. And I will probably get stopped out a few times with small losses or break even losses. And I will forego that short-term profit that I have been taking on these bounces. But that just shows my mindset somewhat agreeing with you in the sense that, the darkest days are coming. I know we've said it so many times, but I do believe that we are approaching that shift that you are talking about.
Sure. All right, let's take a look at some of these charts and see what they're telling us.
So checking in on CGC, what I am talking about with a trend change, just as an example, we can look at this move that we had from 1789 to 2248. That's a big time move, big percentage gains, but no clear pivot of the daily trend change. If we had come down, established a base of support, and then broke into a higher high, that's our clear trend change. That means that anybody that went short on the way up of this move is now underwater and is forced to cover or hold their bags. And it also shows us that bulls who missed their move on the way up are getting in on this consolidation and buying the dip. So that clear trend change is something that this sector has been lacking for months and months at this point, and something that we're watching for to indicate a sector momentum shift. Right now, the bounce here on CGC after the big gap down open, it's a pretty solid bounce. We're about 5% off of the low. But again, it's all different fractals and time frames where the hourly chart needs to see exactly what I just talked about. We have our low, we have our high of the bounce wherever we top out. Right now we're battling 16 psychological. We would then have to hold the low and see continuation if we're going to see shorts get pressure put on them. Anybody that went short on this bounce would then be underwater. Anybody that went short on the way down today would then be underwater if we could change that hourly trend. And again, it shows bulls buying the dip. Bulls that missed the initial move down to the low $15 range are taking their second chance opportunity to buy in the mid $15 range, and they support the price with that higher low. So we need trend changes on the hourly first, then we'll zoom out and look at the daily chart. And we know the daily chart will likely just give us a daily lower high. We would need the daily trend change to take place. And then if we're talking very convincing sector-wide sentiment shift, we will then need a weekly trend change to take place. What stands out over the last 5 months is the fact that we've seen constant lower highs and lower lows. We have not seen a weekly trend change at any point, we haven't even really come close at any point since back in April. So the first time that we see that happen in half a year or however long it takes will be notable, and we will see bulls and bears react in kind to that shift taking place. And again, comparison to Bitcoin, and a lot of people don't like it because of the fundamental aspect and the fact that there is actual tangible assets in the MJ space, but just looking at it from a perspective of psychology and emotional cycles, it's been 56 weeks, and CGC from the all-time high is down about 74%. Bitcoin, the same massive bull move and massive pullback, it took about 52 weeks, and we pulled back about 84%. So Bitcoin pulled back 10% more than CGC is at right now, but CGC so far is taking about a month longer to find its bottom. Again, this is definitely one of the reasons why I am looking to establish a longer term position. So I did buy the dip today on CGC. I scaled in multiple orders. I did a little bit of flipping, and essentially I ended with an average of about 1580. So depending on how we close is going to determine if I want to swing trade that position or not. But I'm going to be looking to establish a position down here in the $15 range. If we drop to lower lows, I've allocated plenty of capital where I will be comfortable adding to that position. But I will look to establish a position that eventually I can put a stop loss at break even on and let ride. If I put a stop loss at 1580 right now, we would likely pull back down when we need to set that hourly high or low, and I would likely get stopped out. So I'm holding off on that stop loss just yet. And again, I only have one of potentially 4 positions that I would be looking to enter into. So if we do drop down and break $15 to a lower low, I would definitely be just fine establishing a bit of a bigger position as we look for a short-term temporary bottom to be found.
Dan, thanks for joining us again today. Insightful as ever. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
See you soon, James.
Let's talk about Aurora. Recently, your financials, you more or less delivered on
Here are the
what?
headlines moving markets today.
If you're lucky to buy it 3 days ago at 37 cents,
And I think it has a lot to do with some of these smaller names giving really...
Recreational cannabis is here. It's quite dry. So I'm going to eliminate the stocky bits. Well, so nothing to be cheered about from Dan's little contribution there this week again.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the oil stocks have really run this week.
So let's talk about commodities then.
Okay.
Though cannabis is ultimately a commodity, it's not the one we're going to talk about today. What about gold?
Well, gold, since rates have decided to back off a bit, gold's been on a bit of a tear. It got down to, I got the right number, 1446 on the front month. It's now about 1476. It's up about $30 this week.
No kidding.
Yeah, and rates, which were up to 197, the 10-year rate is now about 182.
The 10-year rate?
The 10-year, the Treasury rate, yeah.
Wow.
10-year rate.
The tenure.
Tenure.
If you got tenure.
You're laughing.
Oh, that's amazing.
And the S&P's at an all-time high with fewer and fewer companies participating again. It just, we'll see. We're going to see.
Gold's back to 1470 after being knocked all the way back down to 12. Let's see, it got down to the low was here, 1167th on August.
Don't tell me the year. Don't tell me the year. I'm going to say August 2014. Am I right?
What the hell was that? August 2015.
What? 14.
Oh, sorry. August 14th. No, August 14th, 2008 was 1157.
What? And so that wasn't the low. Was that the low? The high?
Sorry. The low was in November 27, 1044.
1044?
Yeah.
The year 1044?
Yes.
That's the year of Hastings, the Battle of Hastings.
Adrian.
Oh yeah, Battle of 10, yeah.
1066. Boy, historically, we're all that.
It was cold
so
that
enough
year.
about cannabis.
Okay, fuck.
Do you know a sector that's coming up hard and fast, and we're early in it, is esports.
Esports, I know.
And Dan Mitri is the CEO of Wave Esports, and he knows a thing or two about investing in esports, and he's going to tell us about the investment methodologies deployed by his company, Wave Esports. Here's Daniel Mitri with Wave Esports.
Game begin.
We're back with the Wave Esports Weekly Esports Update. I'm here with Daniel Mitri, CEO of Wave Esports. And today we're going to talk about the Wave Esports portfolio and the methodology for making acquisitions into the portfolio. Dan, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always great to be here with you, James.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan, let's start with an overview of the philosophy guiding your investment process.
Yeah, so Wave Esports, very top level, we are in the business of pushing esports forward. It's an industry that I grew my career out of, which is gaming. So I got a lot of skin in here, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And the communities latching onto this are also very passionate with gaming in general and the esports industry. But Wave is here to push esports forward. We innovate. We have purpose in our investments, and our sole goal is to elevate the esports and competitive gaming industries. And we do that by placing capital into early and mid-stage companies, but most importantly, we become operators within every investment. So we come in, we operationalize these companies, we bring in help with their weaknesses. Maybe they don't have a strong marketing team, we have a marketing background. Maybe they need help in capital and market movement or legal preparation. Well, we have back office services there. And so we compensate that by taking stock options. But we're here to help these companies grow with sustainability in mind. And Wave is set up into two pillars. We have an acquisition arm, which is our top line revenue performers. So those top line revenues are coming in and helping Wave's valuation increase, our share price increase. But we also have our holdings arm, which is the traditional sort of investment model in which we latch on those operative components.
And so to some degree, you're an incubator.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, esports within North America is growing. This is at the infancy stage in a lot of regards, especially relative to, say, Asia or Europe. So we are an incubator in the sense that we come in, we bring in that working capital, give them the firepower they need in order to continue developing their businesses and see the revenues come in year over year.
Okay, so the argument for investing in Wave Esports is, I guess, then diversification, and therefore protection from the downside by having a diversified exposure, your expertise in evaluating esports opportunities, and then obviously access to opportunities in the industry by virtue of your connectivity to the industry.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, well, why invest in Wave when I could just go invest in a single team? Well, you certainly can, but certain verticals and especially specific verticals can be volatile all by themselves in a vacuum. And the portfolio that we bring, we're very excited about. We're very proud. This is portfolio we brought to the CSE. We're publicly traded now. We're 13th day in our public trading, seeing some awesome volumes. What we say here is you invest in the esports ecosystem, and the ecosystem is what pushes esports forward, not just a single vertical. And the ecosystem is reliant on each other, or the verticals within the ecosystem is reliant on each other. So you have teams, right? And we invest very much into teams, but teams need a place to play.
Okay.
So that's why we invest in events and activations. Well, events and activations need those teams to come out, but they also need a platform to connect people online to tell them about the news coming up or compete in online tournaments, and that's where the platforms come into play. So without the optimized businesses within each one of these verticals, none of them can survive. And so when you invest in to Wave, you invest in the ecosystem. ecosystem. And it's the ecosystem that pushes the industry forward.
So specifically, what kind of esports companies within the ecosystem are you most attracted to presently?
So we broke down the esports ecosystem into 4 verticals: teams and organizations, events and tournament organizers, platforms and networks, and technologies and tools. And within those, there are some gargantuan players that are really, bringing in some incredible marketing exposure. They're hitting some awesome headlines, whether it's a big capital raise or they want a big prize purse. So let's take, for example, one of our teams that we invested in, Lazarus, which is owned and operated by Title. They went out, they won $3.5 million in the Fortnite World Cup, and because of those revenues coming in, Title is able to reinvest into other acquisitions. So they just locked down Space Gaming, which is an online tournament provider, and some other organizations within that. But Title is very much working as an esports organization as well, and so they understand the value of diversifying even their investments. And so yes, we bring a very diversified and resilient portfolio to the public market.
Fantastic. Okay, so what are the risks for investors who don't approach the entire esports opportunity with this kind of a holistic viewpoint?
Well, you get a very narrow view. And there's a tweet recently going around with a team that released their financial statements, and they saw some profitability here in so far in 2018 and 2016, with a negative hit in 2017. You can't just look at that as a single indicator of how the esports industry is moving and the profitability there. You need to look at it holistically. What's the event operators doing? What's the platforms and networks? How are they monetizing on their hundreds of thousands of users within their ecosystem? How are tech and tools really supporting the backbone of the industry? So as an investor, you should look at the industry as a whole and not just a sliver of that, to really understand the potential here, the growth multipliers, and where the real revenue opportunities lie.
Interesting. All right, we're going to leave it there for now, Daniel. We'll come back to you again next week. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, James.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Make sure you never miss a show by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking on the little notifications bell. If you're interested in getting monthly actionable investment ideas in the cannabis space to your inbox, subscribe to the newsletter at MidasLetter.com. New Waves charts. Okay. So yeah, Dan's got his head wrapped around the esports space, probably, I would think, better than anybody else. New Wave Esports is our client on the media side, just by way of disclosure.
Well, let's take a look at the chart.
Yeah, take a look at the chart.
So we've been public now since middle of October, looks like, or early October. What a month. What October was that? Last year? No, last month. Yeah, so we're seen to be finding a bottom here. The only thing these short-term charts are difficult because this used to be a mining company, so people that had these shares for a long time probably thought, well, I'll be able to garner some liquidity, in which they probably did. But here it is trading at a dime. I think there's 70, 80 million shares. I know that it's amazing. You find this being advertised on a lot of websites.
Yeah. Okay. What about the S&P?
So the S&P is just, it seems to be grinding higher. And let's see here. What do we got? We got take a look at that 6-month chart. And here it is. Up here in the stratosphere, it's never really been higher. Every day, plus or minus, it's hugging that 3,100.
Things must be great. Things must be awesome. Now, remember back when the cannabis market was actually frothy and on fire and appreciating daily? We discovered that there also had to be a correlation to the S&P having a good day. If the S&P had a really bad day, so did cannabis. And now that whole correlation is completely evaporated. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the S&P is doing, cannabis is going lower.
I think, look at the 5-year chart of the S&P. So 5 years ago, pre-Trump, Trump's only been there for 3 years. The index has gone from 2,000, that's not, basically to 3,100, 2,000, 3,100. And that's in 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And it's been sort of moving there. Trump gets in, And our Carl Icahn, the day Trump got elected, and as soon as it was confirmed it looks like he was going to win, Carl Icahn said to the interviewer, I got to leave you right now because I'm going to go put $1 billion in the stock market. So if he put $1 billion in, and he probably put it in the right spot, he's up 50%. So his billion's now worth $1.5 billion.
Carl, he's
lend
an
me some
icon.
money. Carl,
Anyways, that's our show for today. I hope you liked it. If you didn't, then, well, I don't know what to tell you. Subscribe
your
to us
problem.
if you want. But,
you didn't like it?
Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow.